I wanted to make a video talking about some of the foundational things that you'll need to understand as far as music theory in order to be able to play or to be able to sing music that is given to you, sheet music as we call it, so that even if you're a complete beginner, this video will start at the very beginning. Now, music is written on 5 parallel horizontal lines that we call the staff. The staff is referring to this up here where it's got 5 parallel horizontal lines. Notes can be placed either on the lines themselves, as you see every other note here is placed on a line, or they can be placed on the space in between the 2 lines. So right here we got spaces. Now simply just writing out these pitches on the staff doesn't tell us what notes these actually are. So this note right here, we don't exactly know what that pitch is referring to until we assign what's called a clef. Now there's 2 very common clefs that we use in music, and that first of all is the treble clef right here, and then you also have the bass clef right here. So this is the bass clef, and then this is the treble clef up here. Another name for these clefs is called the G clef and the F clef. Now the reason that this one is called a G clef and this one is called an F clef is because if you look at this treble clef right here, this final loop of the treble clef centers around the second line from the bottom. Centers around this line right here, the second one from the bottom. And that pitch is a G. So if we look on here at the note that is written on the second line, this one right here is a G. And the F clef down here, also referred to as the bass clef, it is called the F clef for the same reason that the treble clef is called the G clef, and that is because this right here centers around the 4th line of the staff, and that 4th line is F. So we got a dot right here below the 4th line and a dot right here above the 4th line. It centers that 4th line right there. If we look over here to the note that's written on the 4th line right here, this note is an F. One thing that's important to understand is that there are only 7 letters that we use to indicate pitches. We use the letters A through G, and they are also written in alphabetical order. Therefore, after F in our alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, the next note would be G. Once we get to G, the cycle goes back and starts again with the letter A. So after G, there's no H note, it goes back to A. It goes back through the cycle. So that note is an A. Now if we go backwards in our alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, what comes before F? That is E. What comes before E? That is D. And then this note would be a C, this note would be a B, and then this note would be an A. And then this note right here is a G. So we got G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. Those are the pitches on the bass clef. So we got 5 lines and 4 spaces. The lines of the bass clef have the notes G, B, D, F, and A. I'll circle them there. G, B, D, F, and A. Those are the lines of the bass clef staff. And the spaces are the notes A, C, E, and G. A, C, E, and G. Now going back up to the treble clef, if we keep in mind that the letters are in alphabetical order, what comes after G in the alphabet? Well, there's no H in music, so we have to start back in our cycle to A. After A, of course, we got B, C, D, E, and F. Before G in the alphabet, we got F, and then we got E. So, the notes of the treble clef staff from the bottom line all the way up to the top line, we have E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. The lines of the treble clef are E, G, B, D, and F. Every good boy does fine. And to remember the spaces, you just remember face. F, A, C, and E. But what if we want to have more notes than what is written on the staff? Because if you limit music to just these notes right here on the bass clef staff and these notes on the treble clef staff, 9 pitches here and 9 pitches there, you'd only have 18 notes to choose from. Well, we can extend the staff with what are called ledger lines. Ledger lines are lines that are placed either above or below the staff in order to temporarily increase the size of the staff. So we could have notes on the first ledger line, the second ledger line, or the third ledger line, all the way up, as many ledger lines as you want to put. All the way up to the human ear can hear, that is. And you can also have ledger lines below the staff. Now, if we remember that the top line of the treble clef is the note F, what comes after F in the alphabet? G. G is written just above that top line there. This is F, and then G. At what comes after G in our cycle, we go back to A in the alphabet. Now, in order to write the note A, we need a line right here, which is called a ledger line. And that note A will center that ledger line right there. So we got the note A right there. And after A, we can also have B right here. B is written above the first ledger line. After B, we can do the note C. C is written on the second ledger line above the staff. Now keep in mind with ledger lines, they act just like the regular lines of the staff. You can have notes that go on the line or on the space in between the lines. This works in the opposite direction too. So we can have ledger lines that go below the staff. If we remember that this note right here is E, then this note right here, what comes before E in the alphabet? The note D. Now, in order to write this next note, I'm going to have to add a ledger line. There, we got a ledger line there. And we're going to put this note right in the middle of that ledger line. And that note is going to be C. Below C, we get the note B. And then below B, we get the note A. Now let's try the same thing with the bass clef this time. If we remember that this note right here is the F, another name for the bass clef is the F clef because it centers around this fourth line from the bottom. If we remember that this is an F, our next note is a G, then the next note is an A, and then the note above that, after A in the alphabet, of course, is B. And then for this next note, we need to draw our first ledger line above the staff. That will give us, if we place a note on that ledger line, that'll give us the note C. Going on up, placing a note above that first ledger line, we got the note D. On the second ledger line there, just right on it, we get the note E. And then above the second ledger line, we get the note F. And then on the third ledger line, we get the note G. And that could continue on up. You could draw as many ledger lines as you want. They work just as the staff lines do. They can go on the lines themselves or on the spaces in between the lines. This right here is indicating a space because it's written just above that line. We don't put a line right there just because it would be more than necessary to get the idea, because obviously this is a lined note. This right here is a space note because it's written above the line. So just keep in mind that these work just as staff lines do. They're a temporary staff line that you put above or below the staff. Going in the opposite direction, we can add ledger lines going below the staff. If we remember that this note right here is a G, this note right underneath it, before G in the alphabet, is F. And then to get our next lowest note, we need to add a ledger line below the staff and draw this note right here directly on this ledger line. That note is E. Below E, we get the note D. And then below D, we get the note C. And then below C, we get the note B. And so on and so forth. So ledger lines, I think we got a good idea of ledger lines now. They work just as staff lines do. They just temporarily increase the size of the staff. You can go as high as you want or as low as you want. Now, the thing I will point out is if we take this C right here, this first ledger line below the treble clef, this is the same exact C as the C that is one ledger line above the bass clef staff. So let me draw a bass clef here. This C that is one ledger line above the bass clef is the same C as the C that is one ledger line below the treble clef. Now, this is important because this indicates the center of these two staffs. We could have just an imaginary line here between the treble clef and bass clef staff. We could just have one big line there indicating middle C. So you got middle C right here in the middle of these two clefs. It's one ledger line below the treble clef and one ledger line above the bass clef. And it is indicating the middle C right there. And if you're playing on the piano, it's the fourth C that occurs on the piano. So we often call it C4, indicating that not only is it the note C, but it is the fourth C that occurs on a piano. So that C4 is called middle C, C4. Now another way to visualize middle C and to further ingrain it in your memory, if this is middle C right here, it's one ledger line above the bass clef staff and one ledger line below the treble clef staff. This is the same C on the piano. This is the same C on the piano. So below C in this direction, if we write notes on the bass clef staff, this is a B, this is an A, this is a G, and this is an F. And then this one ledger line above the staff is a C. Writing on the treble clef now, one note above the C, I'm going to draw a line up here indicating notes for the treble clef now. So this note is a C. It's shared by the treble and bass clef. One note above C is D. And then above D we got E. And then I don't need to write all the pitches we just learned of the treble clef. But look how this continues our series. We see how the treble clef and bass clef are united. They both go through this series right here through this scale. So this note, I'll go ahead and play this series. Starting at the F on the bass clef. and then going up to the G, then the A, then the B, then the C, C, we're at the middle C right now, C, D, E, F, all the way up to this F. So now we can go back down, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F. Hopefully this can help you visualize middle C better. And also keep in mind that this note right here, D, you can also think of it as D on the bass clef. So this D right here for the bass clef is the same D as this D right here on the treble clef. And this E right here on the treble clef is the same as this E right here on the bass clef. Now this F on the treble clef up here is the same F as this F right here on the bass clef that is written above the second ledger line right there. So this F and this F are the same exact F. F, F, E, E. These are the same E's. D, D, C, C. So how cool is that? Now, fill in this section here. If this is one ledger line below the treble clef, what's another way to write this same exact B? It would be one ledger line below the treble clef staff. This B right here, and then this B are the same B. This A right here, two ledger lines below the treble clef staff. This G right here, and this F right here, three ledger lines below the treble clef, is the same as this note, this F right here. So that's pretty cool. Now, don't worry if that went over your head just a little bit. We'll be talking more about this in the next video. But hopefully this gives you an idea of middle C and gives you a few ways to think about it. Now, if you've ever looked in a hymnal, you'll notice how the treble clef and the bass clef are written on top of each other in the hymnal. And I'll show you this example right here on the song. I flipped open the Look and Live. If you look right here, you see the treble clef at the top there, and then the bass clef below it. So you have the treble clef and then the bass clef right below it. And whenever you have these two clefs joined together with a line, whenever you have these two clefs joined together with a line right there, we call it a grand staff. And if you're reading a hymnal as a singer, the soprano and alto lines are going to be found on the treble clef right here, and the tenor and bass lines are going to be found on the bass clef down here. So the treble clef contains the soprano and alto lines. Soprano and alto. The bass clef contains the tenor and the bass lines. So tenor and bass. The soprano lines will be the upper notes in a piece of music, whereas the alto notes will be a lower note in the music. The tenor notes will be on the bass clef, but they'll be on the upper end of the staff. The bass notes will be on the lower end of the staff. But I wanted to point that out just because you'll notice it in a hymnal. The treble clef and the bass clef are joined together, and you have notes for the soprano and alto and the notes for the tenor and the bass lines written on top of each other, stacked 2 and 2. So that'll just about wrap up this video. The last thing I wanted to go over was just an application for if you play the ukulele. I'll show you this right here. The 4 strings of a ukulele are tuned to G, C, E, and A. So those 4 pitches, G, C, E, and A, we'll write those pitches on the treble clef staff here. Now, do we remember where G is on the treble clef? Well, if you think there's another name for the treble clef, it is called the G clef because this last loop centers around the second line. So that second line is G. So your ukulele string, G, C, E, A. The first one there is a G. And below G, G, C. We got C right here. One ledger line below the staff. G, C, E. We got E right here. And then A right here. G, C, E, A. So that is an application for the content. Some of the content we just learned is just realizing that the strings on your ukulele are tuned to G, C, E, and A. And we will talk further about how you can apply some of the next content to your instrument as well. But just getting an idea that when I'm tuning my ukulele, I'm tuning it to these pitches. Well, those pitches are found on this treble clef staff right here. So it's very good information to keep in the back of your head for now that will help you as you play the ukulele.